Okay, what's up? Ryu here. I wanted to make a video of some thoughts that have been kind of floating in my head for a long time, and I kind of finally sort of got a pretty good picture of how I wanted to put things and have it be a helpful resource for other people. Kind of just talking about my own general philosophies to how I improve about things and things. This is mostly going to be aimed towards HOTS players, but it applies to a lot of stuff. Basically, how you can be your own coach instead of paying for coaching or just being lost or stuck and ranking up, and works competitively, works in team environments, works solo play, all that type of stuff. Cool. So, why are you going to listen to me in the first place? So, I'm Riokaii. I just kind of am compulsively a perfectionist about a lot of stuff. I spend a lot of my time just learning new things. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, educational content, that type of stuff. It's just sort of like a interesting thing to me. I also play a lot of video games. I've gotten to pretty high top level in a lot of them. Not quite to be like the best person in the world, but like where I can understand the gap between where I'm at and the best person in the world, and I actually like cognitively understand the difference of what I would have to do to reach there and things like that. Because basically, it gets exponentially harder the higher you go up, but you can get, I would say, 99% of the way very quickly if you know how to speed up that process, and then you actually reach the hard stuff that takes the time, basically. So I've gotten legend multiple times in Hearthstone. I've been masters for like tons of seasons in HOTS. I won the championship in NGS in both Division A and then Heroic in a later season. I participated in Heroes Lounge Division S in the second season of that. Right now, I'm mostly doing WoW rating. I've been US top 50-ish. I pretty regularly have logs that are top 100 in the world on my main class, which is Hunter. I was a Dust Force speedrunner and Tasser. I've played in SGDQ 2014. I've been top 50 multiple times on the last Epoch arena ladder in like some weekend tournaments, things like that. I've been top 100 multiple times in Diablo 3 season ladders, stuff like that. Bunch of other niche stuff, not really worth listing here. Okay, so what is my number one recommendation? First step, pay attention. You have to pay attention. This is very hard to do to train yourself. I have more slides talking about this in more in depth, but just to start, it's really hard to statistically improve and basically impossible to get better purely on accident. Okay, it's not going to happen. You have to put in mental effort in order to improve. If you invested in yourself and not other people, that's also pretty key. It will give you a big return on your investment. You have control over the rewards. You have control over the time you put in. You have control over the effort you're putting in. You have control over determining what the return is going to be. So, like a very basic transaction system between yourself that you can guarantee is going to give you a good return, basically. Other people are AI agents. I wanted to reword this, but I couldn't figure out a different wording that I liked. Basically, it's like other people, you shouldn't entirely disregard them. You should still think of ways that you can influence people in order to make yourself have a higher chance of success in games and things like that. So if you see something on the map that needs doing and your teammates should pay attention to, pinging that is a good idea. Arguing with them and calling them bad if they don't do it and things like that, being toxic, that stuff is obviously not good to do. So like I don't know. It's gets too messy to like go into all the in depth of like how you can be like a productive communicator type thing and not be toxic. I wanted to leave that out of this, so let's just cover this as a blanket topic. But that would be a separate topic itself of like how you can fix your communication style. If you don't trust yourself, because I think you first of all you're paying attention to yourself. You need to be honest. You'll figure it out pretty quickly based on how other people are reacting to you. I think. If you don't trust yourself that you are a good effective communicator, uh, you should just default to not communicating at all. Will that hinder your progress? Yes. Will it likely put a artificial ceiling on your amount that you can grow and the rate that you can grow? Yes. But I think being a uh, non-interactive person in your environment is probably better than being a negative influence in your environment. Let me put it that way. So if you don't trust yourself, uh, do that because it's still probably better than being negative. All right. Basically, autopilot is different to inattentiveness. I wanted to also emphasize this. Being inattentive is what you're avoiding. You will still autopilot. It is basically unavoidable that you will be running on autopilot sometimes. You're going to have a default thing. But if you're still paying attention when you're running on default, and you can't maybe pay your full attention, but you're only paying attention to kind of your own internal self and your own what your default reactions are to things. And a lot of times it's good to, you can play on autopilot, and then when you do have more attention, go review that later and see what your autopilot is doing. That's also a way that you can kind of get around this. But anyway, so if something happens in a game and you don't notice it, it's pretty hard to learn from that, right? Like this, a lot of this stuff is going to seem very obvious, and I'm going to be repeating myself a fair bit here, but I'm trying to kind of drill these points in because I think I need to emphasize the importance of them, and it's going to be really hard to train yourself. But I think if you come back to this and you kind of like take these as guiding principles that you'll need to catch yourself and reorient yourself towards, and probably remind yourself of several times in the process. And it's a regular process. It's an always ever-changing process that you'll get better at, and you will make adjustments to over time and things like that as your situations change and your learning changes as you go higher or get stuck or whatever. So you have to be observant before you can be analytical, basically. Uh, if you're not observing the stuff, then you can't really analyze it, right? Makes sense. Your habits are your bare minimum. So your worst performance is kind of your baseline. You want that to be what you're improving. You're not trying to improve when the one time out of a million games that you play out of your mind and you know what you already know the every mistake your opponent's going to make, perfectly counter it and things like that. If that's the one time that you're playing for the world championship, then that's great. But here's the reality is that if you're not as good at your baseline, the other 99.999% of games, you're never going to get to that championship game in the first place, right? And you're never going to even be playing for the championship. You won't even be playing for the amateur league playoffs. Like you won't have ever gotten that far or anywhere close. So you want your baseline to be what you're improving, and that will even let you get to those places where then your peaks can actually meaningfully have meaning and make a difference in like the important, you know, high stakes games or whatever. So pay attention to your own thoughts and habits. Ask yourself what you're thinking constantly. You don't do this necessarily consciously, but more so when you find you'll have trigger, I think, phrases or thoughts that you will pay attention to, and they should immediately spark uh, a a mental kind of trigger in your head where you say, I just thought that. That's something that I need to pay attention to. What made me think that? Why am I thinking that? And that's a place where I need to analyze that situation later when I can put more full focus on it when I'm not trying to play a game at the same time. Right? Like it's kind of hard to do while you're playing, but you mostly want to note down when those triggers happen, and you want to be able to notice the triggers. You don't want to have those triggers happening and you not notice them, and just breeze past them and you forget them by the time the game is over and you have no record of it. You have to go back and it's a waste of time. You want to be efficient in your use of time and things like that. If you can't come up with answers, these are if and those triggers happen and you've gone back and analyzed them and you can't find out answers to them. That's a good place to look for external sources of coaching or things like that, where people might notice when you should be having a trigger and you're missing it and it's not causing the trigger for you in your head, or when you're having the trigger but you can't figure out what's causing that trigger. People can then point it out for you of like, oh yeah, it's just actually this thing that was like 15 or 30 seconds earlier that's causing this to happen, and it's a little bit hard to figure it out tracking it unless you're kind of to look for it already. So you go back 30 seconds and then you can point it out and you'll see, oh, every time this happens 30 seconds later I have this trigger, and you'll notice it yourself now, and you can then help point it out to other people and things like that. So it's a good sharing of knowledge and things like that. So that's all good. Trying to kind of pay it forward here, my knowledge that I have gained a little bit. So uh, results informed analysis is good. Results based analysis is bad. Okay, there's a difference. So if something you gave you a good result, that's one data point, right? That's not a conclusion. The thought process, the analysis doesn't stop there. It's not a final ending of the analysis. It's one data point, and you're tracking hopefully tens or hundreds of data points all at the same time, and you're getting a more accurate view of what the overall kind of average is, or what the average slope is, or things like that, if you understand statistics, graphs, or whatever. So if it gave a bad result, also, that's not a conclusion either. Either you made a mistake, or you shouldn't have done it, or uh, something else in the game like caused that to happen, basically. But you need to find out what the actual cause of the bad result was before you can kind of say whether it was your mistake or someone else's mistake. For example, learning from other people's mistakes is very helpful. Obviously, you are in less control of them making that mistake versus not making that mistake. So to some extent, they're also less useful. You should place much more weight on your own mistakes. If you are making a mistake, like it's good to point out to other people if they're a teammate of yours or something like that, but you also have to be an effective communicator to communicate that effectively and make that a productive, constructive process rather than a negative one. But that's again getting into the weeds a little bit. Sometimes good results turn into bad results when you finally have a higher skill level opponent that accurately punishes what the thing you're doing is. So it'll work against bronze players, it'll work against silver players. Suddenly you're playing platinum and diamond players, and it's turning bad for you, and you're like, but this was working. I'm confused. Things like that. So new data needs to inform new conclusions. You're constantly reevaluating what you're doing, and very rarely will you find something that you say this will work 100% of the time, and my opponent can't do anything about it. Chances are, if that happens, the game is either not balanced or it's a very bad non-interactive game in the first place, and it's probably not going to engage you for very long. And the competitiveness of that game is probably not going to be very fun to play long term. Let me put it that way. Because if you have things that you can't, or that your opponents can't interact with, chances are they have things that you can't interact with. That's going to be very frustrating for you, and it might take a lot of the fun out of the game. So your baseline is probably to expect that things will have some level of interactivity to them, where we'll constantly be expecting things to change based on how your opponents are interacting in response to what you're doing. You basically have to adapt yourself, or you're going to hit a ceiling and stop and plateau, and your effectiveness is just going to be at one level, and it'll work against everyone below that level and not work against anyone higher than that level. This applies to actions, obviously, you, your teammates, and your opponents take. So, if you evaluate a result and see it from other people, that's additional data points that you can take in for free, kind of. You're learning from multiple people at once, you're learning faster. Uh, and a lot of learning is time investment and the quantity of your experiences. You can't experience everything, you can't play every possible combination of 5 people in a team comp against every combination of other 5 people in a team comp. Can't do that firsthand. So you have to learn from external resources, but you can also speed up your learning from those resources. If you get good at this, you can watch something at 2 times speed and then only slow it down and watch it maybe at half speed for the important moments that you're trying to learn from. You can skip over the stuff that isn't going to be as useful to you rather than playing every game in real time yourself. So learning from streams, videos, things like that, obviously very good. But you kind of have to train yourself uh, of how to pay attention and things like that first before you're really going to get the actual value out of those things. So, time is your most precious resource. This is in game and outside of game. Uh, in game, you basically want to be efficient with your time, and it's often one of the differentiators of what makes a thing good versus not good is how much time does it take and what is the reward I get for that time. But it also applies out of game, where you can learn while not playing. Other people are going to be learning uh, while you're playing or not playing. Doesn't make a difference. Your goal is not to catch up or keep up with the rate that other people are learning. Your goal is to learn at a rate that they cannot catch or keep up with you at. So your goal is not to learn. Your goal is to learn faster and faster and faster, and learn faster than everyone else, basically. Uh, this especially applies if your game ever gets patched or a new giant shakeup of the meta happens or things like that. If you are able to take in the new information, process it, analyze it, and evaluate it, and extract the necessary conclusions from it at a faster rate than everyone else, you're going to reap the benefits of that, and you're going to dominate that meta or that new information, and you're going to be the one teaching everybody else basically how it works when they play against you and they realize suddenly they're the ones that hit the ceiling of effectiveness because what they are trying to do no longer works because you're punishing them for it and things like that. So you're going to reap the benefits of this if you just train these processes rather than actually trying to learn a single meta or a single game situation or whatever. If your results are stuck, your mental attention is stuck. So if you feel stuck, that means you need to kind of check your own uh, mentality of like what you're paying attention to and what you're noticing while you're playing and things like that. I think it would be very helpful for you to record yourself and just talk about every single thought process you have in a game. It's going to be very hard. You're probably going to talk very fast. You're probably still going to miss a lot of stuff. But then you can watch that back later and you can pause and take time and things like that. And you can say, is everything I'm saying something that I should be paying attention to? Is everything that I'm saying important? Am I missing triggers that I should be paying attention to, but I'm not in the moment that they're going past me and I need to quickly change my attention and pay attention to something else? So you need to take in more information or process the information that you're already taking in faster, because sometimes it's not good enough that you're taking in all the information, But if it's taking you 30 seconds to process it and the game state has changed in those 30 seconds, that's not good enough. You kind of need to be able to process things, within 5 to 10 seconds or something, probably maybe even shorter than that, uh, in order for that information to actually be usefully applicable to your current situation and be effective, that you can then translate it into results in the game. Sometimes this takes time. You don't want to be patient though. If it takes time, it will take less time if you force yourself to do it. Okay, you can't just do this and say, oh, it'll take time. I'm just gonna, I'll just play for 3 months and eventually I'll get better at that. No, 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 no. That's a way for you to waste 3 months and still be at the same place that you are, or maybe 10% better. You want to be 50% better within 2 weeks at that thing, right? So you're gonna force yourself to do it. The rest of your gameplay is probably gonna suffer in the meantime. You're okay with that because being worse for 2 weeks in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter. If you play a game for 2 weeks and then drop it entirely, nobody doesn't make a difference. If you play 2 more games, or if you play 2 weeks of ARAM before you ever jump into ranked, does that ever prevent you from getting Challenger? No, right? Or Grandmaster or whatever. Those 2 weeks playing ARAM when you're, or quick match or whatever it is, those realistically don't matter in your ranked climb, right? If you play worse for 2 weeks, nobody cares. Nobody will ever even notice the difference. Even if they do, they'll forget after another 2 weeks when suddenly you're stomping them in every game, right? Learning faster is a long-term investment that will reap the rewards for you in everything after that, for the infinite future, basically. 2 weeks is nothing. It's completely negligible. You have to just force yourself to not care about it. If you're caring about your results in the immediate short term, chances are that you shouldn't, like, there's a lot more wrong with your thought process in that sense. You're not trying to hit a rank. I mean, if the season's ending in 2 weeks or whatever, realistically, your rank at the end of the season won't even matter 2 weeks from now, right? Like, or years from now, things like that. So, uh, if you're placing too much value on what the current state of your rank is or things like that, you're not in the right mental space to even be learning or improving, probably in the first place. And so you need to change your mentality first before you're ever going to really be effective learning. And this whole talk is probably kind of, you're probably not ready for it until you can separate like your own self-worth or your own value that you're placing in your short-term or your rank or whatever, that it says that you're caring too much about that or whatever. Anyway, that's hard. That's again a different talk. So yeah, it's, you need to focus on improving as a priority, not an eventuality. Okay. So monkey see, monkey do. You are going to copy what works. If it doesn't work, you stop doing it. Right? Seems pretty simple. If you don't know why it doesn't work, you might be able to know why it might work in certain situations, but that requires investigation and analysis and things like that. If you don't know why it doesn't work, then you're not ready to be doing it, right? If you see something else working for somebody else but it doesn't work for you, that means you're missing a key piece of knowledge that is enabling it to work for that other person. And you need to drop doing that because it's not being effective for you. You're going to come back to it later when you figure out what piece you were missing. Chances are you'll figure that out from something else entirely, and then you'll realize, oh, that was the thing that I'm missing to be able to do that other thing that I was trying to do that it wasn't working for some reason. Now I know what that reason is. Now I can start trying to implement that again because I understand when and why I should be doing that thing, not just trying to do it and being like, well, it worked for the other person. Why doesn't it work for me? I'm confused. So if it does work, ask yourself why it works. You're not trying to learn just what works. Again, you're trying to learn not to hit a ceiling of effectiveness and then find out it doesn't work. You're wanting to figure out why does it work and will this continue to work as my opponents get better and as my opponents improve. Uh, if it worked on you, it'll work on other people. So if something works against you, you're going to copy that. And if you're ever playing that hero or that character, or you're in that situation, you're going to do it against other people. You're going to copy what works on you on other people. This is how I taught myself a lot of macro stuff. Was I would do macro that I thought was good. My opponents would do macro that they knew was better, and we would somehow fall behind in macro doing what I thought was all the right things. And then I would be like, huh, we ended up behind. Clearly something I did was wrong, or clearly something they did was better. What are they doing? What can I learn from that? Why are they doing what they're doing? Maybe that will work better on people who think they understand macro, like me in the current moment, and I can copy what they're doing, and they'll get punished and end up behind, thinking they're doing all the right things, and then they've outplayed themselves, right? I didn't even have to do anything. I hardly even had to interact with them. But just our differences in knowledge led me to gaining an advantage and being in a better spot and winning more games. So You got taught something, you're going to use it to teach others, right? Whether they want to learn or not, you're gonna force them to learn, and they're either going to lose their games, and you're going to be happy, or they're going to learn, and they'll then teach you because they are able to counter what your learning is and things like that, and it's a back and forth where you're going to teach each other as you each get better and you each counter what the other people thinks is the established knowledge of what you should be doing. They're going to play against you, and their counterplay is going to tell you, no, you can't quite do this thing as often as you thought because I can do this. They'll say, oh, okay, you can do that. Well, then what if I do this as a response? And that you're going to accidentally trick everyone else into becoming teachers for you, so that you're not only having to teach yourself, but everyone you play against is going to be teaching you when they don't even necessarily want to be, or whether they know that they're doing it. So that's also pretty helpful. You're going to repeat this ad infinitum, and then you're going to be an uncounterable person who can adapt to every situation. Obviously, this is unrealistic. Nobody's ever going to get to this point, but this is the kind of uh, theoretical limit of the extent of how far this can take you. It basically takes you as far as the game allows skill expression to take it, right? So here's kind of the main like thesis statement that I'm actually trying to focus on that I was trying to get to this point. It's 20 minutes in. Oh well. Hopefully I was going to go faster at this, but I had more to say as I got talking, I guess. So your emotions are kind of subconscious intellectual questions that you have that your brain wants to find answers to, right? Or that it doesn't know the answer to. So they're automatic though. Your emotions are kind of outside of your control. They're kind of a subconscious thing, right? They're not a conscious thing where you're saying, "I wonder how he did that." Your emotions are saying, "Oh, he did that," and you're just a reaction. You have a natural reaction when you get outplayed. When somebody does something, you die in the game. You're, oh, that's so annoying. Oh, I can't believe I died to that. Oh, my teammate should have done something to help me. Things like that, right? They're kind of an unconscious, natural thing. They're an immediate thing. They don't require a thought first before they express themselves or whatever. They are your mind, wanting to improve, even when your conscious mind isn't being able to pay attention. Either it's being lazy or it just doesn't know to pay attention to that thing yet, and it's getting overlooked and things like that. So this is your coach. This is your internal coach, really. Is your subconscious emotional reactions to things. It's not your conscious mind. It's actually your unconscious mind that is your coach. You're going to listen to their teachings, even when your conscious mind is a poor student, right? So even when your conscious mind doesn't want to pay attention to these things, these are the things that you're paying attention to. Even if your conscious mind says, that's annoying, I'm tilted, I'm not paying attention, I'm on autopilot, I'm just playing the game, I'm mad, I'm frustrated, my teammates aren't listening to me, blah, 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 right? That's your conscious mind being lazy. But your unconscious mind is still going to be noticing these things. They're the things that are causing those negative emotional reactions. Underlying is what you're really saying is your unconscious mind is saying, I don't know why I'm losing this game, or I do know why I'm losing this game, but I can't stop it from happening. Your conscious mind doesn't want to pay attention to the things that are saying, how should I learn from this to get better? Your conscious mind is being lazy and it's saying, I'm mad, I'm not going to pay attention anymore. Because the emotional reaction is so strong and it's overpowering it. But you're trying to change and train your conscious mind into paying attention to those emotional things, and then you can, when your conscious mind is ready to be more of a better student, you can then learn from them later. So these are kind of the trigger things that I want you to be paying attention to whenever you're playing a game. Fear, uncertainty, surprise, and confusion. Those are the four emotional reactions that you're paying super close attention to. That anytime you feel any one of those, that's a trigger that your mind is immediately paying attention to. I need to review that. I need to go analyze that later. I need to bot review that, right? So these are positive emotions. Those might sound sort of negative or like scary or whatever, but these are positive emotions. I want to feel a positive sense in my head whenever I notice one of these and I feel that trigger in my head of that's something I'm paying attention to, right? I want to feel a positive feeling. Oh, I was afraid there. That's good. Okay. I got surprised there. That's good. I'm confused. That's a good thing. Okay. You need to feel a positive reaction to that. It indicates, it's a signal flare of where you can improve and where you're going to learn something new if you explore that in depth, basically, or where you're lacking information that you currently, like that's a way where if you say, I don't know where to improve, I'm confused, I'm lost, I feel like I don't know what I should do in this situation. Again, I would call that uncertainty or confusion, right? Then that's your mind kind of saying, this is a place you can learn from. So pay attention to that. That's super important. But you have to be constantly paying attention to note and kind of mentally put a flag. If you're recording, you have shadow play or something like that, or a stream marker. If you can just have a hotkey of like press that. Whenever you feel any of these things and you notice that trigger in your head, put a stream marker there. Make a clip, find out what it was, and review that moment, and go back and be able to look at it later. Don't let these moments pass you by, and because if you skip over these too many times, it'll go into the unconscious, and your mind will stop paying attention to it, and you don't want your unconscious mind to be lazy, especially where these situations happen and you just immediately default into the emotional reaction, but you don't and you let it overpower you, but you don't have the trigger uh, to go look at it later. So this is the focus that your mental energy is on, is your own emotional reactions to stuff. It's not playing to win, not playing to win the game. Uh, that's nice. Winning the game is good, but if you win the game and you have no emotional reaction to anything in the game, you're not really going to get better or learn anything from that game. It's just a win. It's like, okay, cool, like great, but I'm not trying to win any individual game, right? I'm trying to learn so that I can win multiples more future games, right? I'm investing not in this one game in the moment. That's a single game positive outcome. I'm investing in the 50, 500, 5,000 games I'm going to play in the future, where I'm going to change 50 of those results in those 5,000 games into wins because I learned something from this one game. Even if it means I lost this one game, I end up still plus 49 in the future, right? So it's a long-term investment thing. You're playing to search for the situations that these emotions are springing forth from. You're not trying to find the situations where you win. You're trying to find the situations where you have the emotional reaction to stuff. Winning is kind of your expected baseline. Winning is your autopilot, or it's going to become your autopilot. The win is just something that will naturally come as a result of having paid attention to these things. It's not something that you're paying attention to as a reward in and of itself. It's a kind of a byproduct, a symptom of the rest of what you're doing. It's not the actual end. Uh, it's not the end process. It's not the primary goal because it doesn't actually get you anywhere if that's your main goal. It just gets you to having won a single game. It doesn't. But that doesn't. After that game is over, then where are you? You're in the same place you started, right? You just have to queue up for another game, and then you're starting from square one all over again, and you're paying all your mental attention trying to win that game, and you're just starting from square one over and over. Well, no wonder you're not improving. No wonder you're not going to progress. No wonder you're hitting a ceiling. You're forcing yourself to start over all the time. So, uh, for those of you who have experienced a state of flow or know what I'm talking about, it's not something that I can really easily describe, but hopefully if you've experienced it a couple of times, and it's pretty rare, that you'll know what I'm talking about. It's this sort of state of calm focus where your autopilot is basically operating at the level that your previously peak conscious mind would be operating at. And it's kind of like a very clear sign that you've kind of like stepped up a level in terms of like mental processing stuff, where it's kind of like your speed of processing stuff is so fast now that your unconscious mind can take over doing it. Your conscious mind doesn't have to be the one doing it anymore. And so once that shift happens and you're in that state of flow, that's when you play your best games, realistically. That's when those peak 1 in a million games where you played out of your mind and you knew everything the opponent was going to do before they even did it, and you knew 5 seconds beforehand, so you had the time to fully process what your response should be to that situation, be able to counter it. And it was like they were completely hopeless and they have no idea how they constantly were getting outplayed in this game. That's what being in flow is kind of like. It's uninterrupted. There's no distractions. You're not even. Here's the thing: the state of flow. When you're in that state, you're not being distracted of experiencing the emotions of fear, uncertainty, surprise, and confusion. Right? It's when those emotional reactions stop happening that you enter flow in the first place. Right? So if we're paying attention to these and slowly checking off the boxes that are causing these things to happen, we're slowly eliminating the things that are preventing us from entering that state of flow. Okay? If we're not paying attention and not checking off those boxes, and those things are going to keep happening because, well, I got surprised again because I wasn't expecting him to do that thing, and now I lost the game because I was thinking I could do this thing and he surprised me and I wasn't ready for it and things like that. I can't enter flow now because, oh, that happened. I'm frustrated that I thought I would be able to do this thing and I can't. Boom, you just eliminated flow from ever happening for the rest of that game, and probably the rest of that play session. The next 2 hours or something. You probably can't enter because that's going to be in the back of your mind and it's going to be bugging you. Maybe even only subconsciously, but it'll bug you. That'll be a situation. You think about it, you're trying to fall asleep. Oh, I can't believe he did that, and I got surprised by it. Whatever. I should have expected him to be there. Well, why didn't you? Because you weren't paying attention to your emotional reactions to stuff for the previous 500 games that you've been playing, right? It's not an effort focus, it's a passive and automatic background process, right? You already know the answers to. It's the easiest test you've ever taken in your life. Uh, your goal, you want to be able to enter flow for as often and as long duration as possible, right? So if you're paying attention to these emotional reactions, you're going to be eliminating the things that are causing them. Then you're going to be able to enter flow more often, right? We're not entering flow just because I want to. That right? Okay, good. That doesn't work. That doesn't get you anywhere. It's the same thing as just trying to win the single game. Just trying to enter flow a single time doesn't help you at all. You're trying to enter flow regularly. You're making your flow state your autopilot state. Okay. So again, I'm emphasizing this second slide. You have to pay attention to your own reactions. It's really, really hard if you're not used to doing it. It takes a long time to train yourself to do this. It's very easy to play 2,000 games of a MOBA and not pay attention the whole time and just be surprised all the time and be confused all the time and not wonder how to improve and hit a ceiling and think that you just have to get better on your mechanics. And that's the only reason that you're losing games is just because that guy outplayed you. Your mechanics aren't good enough, right? Truth is, that's not the answer. That's not the reason why you're not improving. Here's some example things that I've maybe thought in my head of trigger things that are reactions that I should dig into deeper. That these are situations that are kind of the surface level thought. These aren't the thought that you should necessarily want to be analyzing. Just saying something's dumb or annoying doesn't really offer a lot of space for analysis. But some of these later ones do. I wish I could do X. I can't because of Y. Okay, we'll figure out why Y is happening. Figure out why you can't do X. Is there a way that you can have X to happen? Things like that. Or just being frustrated or tilted in general. Notice what things are causing you to get tilted, and quickly you'll figure out and find some trigger things that are happening in that are causing these emotions, and you'll quickly figure out what you need to be paying attention to that you're currently not. So first one, fear. I don't think I can do X. If I do X, Y will or might happen. Is there a way I can do X that it doesn't make me feel afraid? So like I want to walk into that bush, but I'm afraid to. Is there something that will let me not be afraid so that I can walk into that bush, right? Is walking into that bush something I need to be afraid of? Do I know that all 5 people are elsewhere on the map and I'm just not looking at my mini map and paying attention to that, and I don't need to be afraid of that bush in the first place? If you're afraid, you review that situation, examine why you felt the fear, find out how you can avoid feeling fear in that situation in the future. Oh, I need to pay attention to my mini map more, and then I know I can walk into that bush and I can rotate here. Oh, I checked the replay. I did a VOD review. Oh, I was afraid of walking in that bush, and yeah, like the enemy Garrosh was like stood in that bush, and I would have died if I face checked that bush. Good. I know I should not face check that bush in that situation. That's good. I'm reinforcing that I felt something, and it was good to feel that something in that situation. That means my learning and my processing is on the right track. It knows what it should be paying attention to, and it's being correct in its conclusions that it's reaching. That's good. It means, or maybe the Garrosh was in that bush and I didn't even consider going into that bush. I knew it would be a bad idea. And so it's not that I went into that bush and the Garrosh should have been there and I got away with it. It's that he was there and I'm not going to be getting away with that anymore, right? So it's like something that I could have been maybe punished for, but that I wasn't. That's also a situation. You'll eventually notice a lot more is not, oh, I was getting away with this and now I'm getting punished for it. It's you'll start noticing situations of, oh, I should have gotten punished there and I did get away with it. And you're like, a better player would punish me in that situation, and I know I shouldn't be doing that. So now I know that I need to stop doing that, and that's something that I'm doing automatically in my autopilot that I need to break. I need to pay more attention to breaking that habit. So that's where your mentality will eventually transition into uncertainty. So am I able to do this? How long is it going to take? How much time do I have? How what time am I trying to beat? What thing am I needing to be ready for after that? I only have this certain amount of time to do it. Is doing X better than doing Y? How do I know? Is my opponent able to do this here? I don't know. Are they able to sneak a boss? Are they able to do this objective in time? Are they able to rotate and be able to double clear this wave effectively or whatever? Or just a more general kind of, I don't know what to do. I'm in this situation. I have no idea what to do here. I don't know what I should be focusing on here. I don't know what I should do next. That stuff. This is generally good stuff that you can look for external resources on. It's probably some of the hardest stuff that you can self-coach, but it is still possible. It might require a lot more tedious like manual kind of work and or math of like just testing stuff, figuring out. You might have to go into a custom game, be that hero, be that level or whatever. Find out, how long does it take me to do this camp? Can I solo a boss as this character? Things like that. Or just asking someone else, being like, okay, I don't know what to do in this situation. Have somebody else look at that situation and be like, what would you do here? What should I be focusing on here that I currently don't know what that answer is? And a good coach will sorry, a bad coach will tell you, oh, you should have focused on this, and that's the end of the conversation. A good coach will say, you should focus on this. Here's why, and here's the situation why I think you should be focused on this during this situation. And here's a different, if this was different in this situation, I wouldn't focus on A, I would focus on B instead, because the prerequisites in situation B are leading me more towards focusing on B being more important than A in that situation. Like, that's what a good coach will do. You don't want a coach that just tells you the answer. You want a coach that tells you the process to be able to reach that answer yourself in the future. Okay? That's a big difference that I notice in a lot of coaches, and it bugs the hell out of me when they do that, because this is bad coaching. It is ineffective coaching. It basically just means what they're doing is they're just gonna make you come back to that coach more often and feel more reliant on that coach. It's kind of a weird, like, manipulative thing. I don't think a lot of them are doing it manipulatively like that, maliciously or in self-interest, but I think a lot of them, it's easy to fall into that trap, I guess. Let me put it that way, of getting an ego boost from people relying on you and things like that. I want you as a coach. My goal is that you rely on me as little as possible, and basically that I eliminate my own self from a job, right? I don't want you to be coming to me all the time for coaching. I want you to be able to coach yourself. I want to uh prevent myself from like having a purpose, kind of. I don't know. That's maybe a weird backwards way of thinking about it, but the way I think about it. So, surprise is like I didn't expect that to happen. Why? Just why was my team doing this? Why was my opponent doing this? I just this kind of ties into confusion. A lot of these overlap a little bit. Or I've never seen somebody do that before, or like I didn't think he could do that, or whatever. That type of stuff. Uh, this is kind of knowledge in your prediction background engine. If you know what to expect and predict, you can use that knowledge and make better decisions. If your opponents are doing stuff that you don't expect or predict them to be doing, then you're lacking in knowledge of what your opponents are going to be prioritizing, what you should be prioritizing, things like that. If something is important for your opponent to be doing and you don't know that it's important, but then they still do it and then surprise you with it, well, chances are you ended up in a lower uh, evaluated, like you got lower value out of that situation than you could have, because you allowed your opponent to capitalize on a mistake that you were making, or you allowed them a comeback mechanic in the game, or whatever, that type of stuff. So confusion. How did they do this? Why did that happen? How are we ahead? Why are we behind? What caused that to happen? Since when did we get so far behind? It's like a pretty common question that I found in VOD reviewing with my teams and things like that. It's like, I don't know what we did wrong, but suddenly we're behind a level, and it's like, okay, we need to go look and re-review this whole early game because we thought we were doing fine, and suddenly we're behind by a level. Clearly, we made some mistakes. The game is telling us we made some mistakes, but we don't know where they are, right? So we need to investigate further. Again, really good things to VOD review. Examine previous 30 seconds. Honestly, even previous full minute, 2 minutes sometimes. I mean, it depends on the state of the game. Things like that. Honestly, an easy answer is go back until the previous time where you think you're dead even. The game is a complete 50-50 coin flip. And start from there, and then examine every single situation, every single decision that you make from the moment that you think you're dead even until you notice you're behind. And find out if you think, should that have gotten me that far behind? Like, oh, I messed up on that camp a little. Oh, I messed up on that wave. I was 2 seconds late to get to that wave. Oh, I let that camp, hit our towers for a little bit too long. I should have gotten there 5 seconds earlier. But if you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I see where we made some minor mistakes and things like that. But you're like, I don't feel like those should have led us to being a full level behind, though, right? Chances are you're still missing stuff. If you have to kind of weigh the math on how much you expect you should have gotten behind and how much you did get behind, and if those don't line up, then one side of that equation is wrong and it's missing pieces of that equation, basically. Find the answers to those questions. You'll be able to use those indicators and things like that. You'll make better decisions farther in the future, be able to more accurately predict further outcomes, blah, 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 blah. It all snowballs in a good, healthy, synergistic way. Okay, so basically the end result is you're going to be able to sort after you've done all this, looking at your own emotional reactions to that. You're eventually going to get to the place where you're sorting everything that happens in a game, every decision that you, your opponent, your teammates make. It's in one of three categories, right? It's really actually simple that every game boils down to these three categories, but basically your ability to sort these things correctly and the speed at which you can do it, if you can do it while you're playing, that's obviously much better than only being able to do it outside of game in VOD review, things like that. Your whole skill level in every game is your ability to sort that game into these three categories. Every decision in that game into these three categories. That's what your skill level in a game is. If you're not effective at sorting this, or you're inconsistent at sorting it, chances are you're going to be lower ranked in that game. You're going to be inconsistent in your results in that game. You're going to be good sometimes, and you're going to make the wrong sorting some other times, and that's going to cause you to lose games, right? So you have things that are objectively positive expected value. These are basically decisions and actions we can take. If we do these, and the more we do these, then our opponent, we win, right? It's like in card game, my positive expected value is if his HP is at 1 and I can hit him and make his HP go to 0, I win the game. Okay, that's very basic, right? Hitting the core in HOTS, very basic. Like, if we kill the core, we have expected value on winning the game, right? That's pretty obvious. But there's also stuff like, okay, taking a keep, right? That's kind of a prerequisite to taking the core. So I have an expected value on taking the keep because that leads me to being able to kill the core. Winning map objectives, taking a camp, things like that. It's like, if I let that camp sit here all game, how much value is that giving me? Basically 0. If I take the camp, it's giving me some sort of value. So when do I want to be able to take it to take the most value? I have opportunity cost, right? So there's also, if I'm not taking that camp, I'm doing other stuff. But is there a way I can be doing all that other stuff and still find time to take the camp where I'm not losing out on other stuff like surfing waves? Then when should I do that? When is my opponent least able to interact with taking the camp? That's going to be a more positive expected value than if I take the camp and my opponents immediately clear it and they don't take any damage, structure damage lost from it, and things like that, right? They don't have to invest very many resources in negating my expected value that I just earned for myself, right? There's objectively negative expected value, which is basically, if I do this, my opponents are going to be doing other stuff in the meantime that's getting them bigger rewards, and I'm just going to fall behind naturally, doing as much as I can, but they're just the wrong things to be doing in the first place. We know not to make these decisions. These are things that we should inform our teammates not to make. If you do these, you're going to lose. Simple as that. If you, uh, build a team comp and you have 0 ways of ever killing heroes or soaking minions effectively or getting camps out or dealing structure damage, you're basically going to lose that game, right? It's pretty hard to make that team comp. It probably doesn't actually exist, but to a less extreme example, it does exist where you can definitely make a comp where you're going to struggle to do a lot of things on the map. You're going to be struggling to initiate any team fight when you have an actual advantageous team, but you can never actually get the opponents in a situation where they will be forced into fighting you or things like that. So, or you're just going to fall behind because you can't soak waves effectively. You're going to be behind. You're never going to be able to fight your opponents in the first place, right? It's easy to get into these situations on accident. Most of them are pretty obvious. You'll learn not to do them fairly early on, hopefully. However, you don't expect your opponents to make these decisions, right? We expect our opponents are also making the first category. They're making their own positive expected value decisions. So while we're still looking for these negative expected value things and are prepared, we need to know what we should be doing to punish our opponent for making these mistakes and things like that. We're not expecting them, right? If our opponents do this, we're not relying our game plan on that. We're not saying we expect them to do this and that's how we're going to win the game. No. We're expecting our opponents to do the first category, and if we see them doing this stuff, either we punish it or we do nothing, and our opponents naturally lose, right? These are kind of things where you don't actually need to be prepared to punish, because kind of the being prepared to punish is basically all we need to be doing is category 1. If we're doing this category and our opponents are doing this category, we don't need to know how to punish this, because just doing this is often the punish. Okay? Just let our opponents do this. Don't. Oftentimes, it's sometimes better to not overly get focused on punishing mistakes. Just letting your opponents make the mistakes and just continuing to do what you know is good. This is going to be more consistent long term, and this will work against everybody. As soon as your opponents stop making the mistakes, if you overly focus on just punishing them as severely as possible, that stops working, and a lot of your knowledge suddenly stops being applicable and effective if suddenly your opponents stop making these decisions, right? You don't want to have time and learning invested into, I'm learning this thing. It took me 2 months to learn how to perfectly punish our opponent, missing getting a merc camp timing. Okay, great. But then your opponent everywhere above diamond is going to get that camp, and then you just wasted 2 months of your time learning something that you don't really need to know in the actual reality of how to win the game effectively and consistently. You don't need to know that. Just learning this first stuff, you don't need to know all the stuff of how to counter the second stuff. So if our opponents make more of these than we do, we will win. There's different degrees of extremeness on this. Like 5 small mistakes might not equal 1 large mistake, so you adjust based on the severity of the outcome or whatever. And then the third category is what's called a Nash equilibrium. If you don't know what that means, it doesn't matter. It's basically a neutral expected value where if we're both flipping a coin 100 times and they're flipping a coin 100 times, we're both basically expected to get 50 heads and 50 tails, right? Or within 40 to 60 heads and 40 to 60 tails each, something like that. If it's relying on a hard read of what they're going to be doing, a complete guess of what they're going to be doing, it's inconsistent, it's unreliable. If it only works if I predict my opponent to do this before he's actually going to commit to doing it, and if I do it, I then waste some resource of mine that then I don't have access to, and it's like it's good in the situation where I did guess it correctly and he did play into it, but if I guessed wrong, then I just wasted a resource for no reason, then that's bad. So sometimes the answer is that neither of you can do something without risking that the other person is going to benefit more from doing that thing. So you don't want to default to going into inaction in that case. Your alternative answer is go back to doing the first category stuff. If you find yourself in a situation of this, or trick them into inaction while you continue with the positive actions, right? Get them to be stuck thinking that you're both stuck in this neutral stalemate, standoff or whatever, where you're both like almost going to be able to act and respond if the other opponent acts, or if you both guess correctly, then that's going to determine who wins. But in reality, in the meantime, you're actually continually doing positive actions while they're stuck in that equilibrium doing nothing. So equilibriums are a place for your opponent to get mentally stuck while you avoid becoming trapped in them. Okay, so some practical examples are Rainer versus Diablo. For example, I'm Rainer, I'm standing against the wall. Can I be wall stunned? Do you think the answer is yes? Do you think the answer is no? Well, if Rainer has his Q, the answer is no, he can't, because he can Q the Diablo, unless the Diablo has an unstoppable, right? Like, there's a back and forth here of interactions that you need to learn the answers to. Can Rainer be APOC comboed? Well, if I'm standing on top of the Diablo and he has overpower, then he can press APOC and then overpower and flip me or whatever, and I might then not be able to get out of the APOC in time, no matter what, and then I'm going to guarantee be hit by APOC. But if he's at range, and he's going to have to press APOC and then Q flip me, and I know it's the same as being wall stunned, if I can interrupt his Q every time with Rainer Q, because he's going to come at me in a straight line, I know what that straight line is going to be because it's just Diablo's over here, Rainer's over here. I just have to aim the Q in that line of where the Diablo is on his charge, and it'll hit him on the charge. And if he doesn't press charge, worst case scenario, I Q'd him where he already is. He gets knocked back like 1 centimeter, and then I move away. Then as soon as I see that APOC come out, the best case scenario is I canceled his charge. The worst case scenario is he APOC'd my teammate over here, and he's the one getting APOC comboed, but at least I didn't get APOC comboed, right? So you're trading one resource for a different resource. He used his APOC, I used my Q. His is like a 90-second cooldown, mine's like a 10-second cooldown. I generally came up in that exchange because he wasted a larger cooldown. He invested more resource into losing that interaction, or a neutral interaction being the result of our exchange, and I didn't lose anything. Can Rainer be hit by Condemn from Johanna? This is a bit more of a tricky one. So, Rainer's range is larger than the Condemn circle. So if Johanna is standing over here, and I'm auto-attacking the Johanna, and she presses W, and we both stand exactly still, I will not get hit by Condemn. Okay? But she also gains movement speed, so what if she starts running at me? Well, I can Q her away, right? Same as Diablo stun. It's just a slower Diablo charge. But she also has an unstoppable, right? So she can say, I'm going to press Iron Skin and Condemn at the same time, and I'm going to walk at him with faster movement speed, and then I'm going to try and get him in Condemn range so that Rainer gets pulled in. Well, as Rainer, I can no longer Q, because she's going to be unstoppable with Iron Skin, so I can't use Q to not get hit by Condemn, but I have my W. That gives me movement speed also. So when she uses her Condemn and her Iron Skin to start running at me, I can use my W and I can run exactly the opposite way, and then I still won't get Condemned, right? So there's a bit layers to some of these interactions where if I do this and I know they're going to do this, then I should do this. Well, then they'll also do this, and then we're trading 2 cooldowns for 2 cooldowns instead of 1 cooldown for 1 cooldown, things like that. But it still ends up being neutral. So these are some kind of like Nash equilibrium examples where, as Rainer, I'm not going to press my Q and W just on the wave to clear the wave because it speeds it up by 1 second, right? That's not a very good use of my cooldown. Things like that, because all that means is now Johanna can Condemn me, and I will get hit by Condemn. And as Johanna, I'm not going to randomly hit Iron Skin and Condemn. If I want to hit Rainer and look for a kill, I need to hold those things, and my best case scenario is I use those and I hit Rainer, but the worst case scenario is I use those and Rainer has to waste 2 of their cooldowns or something, or his W or his Q or both, to not get hit by my Condemn, and then we've traded those cooldowns. And then now that he doesn't have Q, now my Diablo, okay, Diablo Johanna is maybe a weird team combo, but whatever, it's for the sake of this example. Now my Diablo can charge him, and he can get APOC combo or whatever, right? So you're also enabling some other interactions by the trades that are happening. So what do we learn? Raynor is effective because of his interactions with tanks and his ability to avoid getting caught in comparison to other ranged squishy champions, right? So if I'm Vala, I have Vault, but I don't have Raynor Q, right? So I might be able to get out of the Johanna running at me, but I can't stop the Diablo from charging me or wall stunning me, or things like that. You kind of technically can because of Rain of Vengeance, and you can stun him in the middle of the charge, but whatever, it's a bad example. I'm trying to think of a better example. Maybe Jaina is better, but she also has the root stuff, so like, yeah, anyway, gets complicated. The interactions are more complicated than I'm making them. I chose some hopefully simple-ish interactions. So what tool is most important? It's probably his Q. It's the fundamental tool that Raynor has that others do not have that change interactions in his favor, basically. That's what I mean by a fundamental. Stuff like Raynor having being a ranged champion that has, does primarily physical damage. It's like, okay, that's a tool he has, but it's not a fundamental tool. Like Vala has that tool. Zul'jin has that tool. Whoever else. Cassia has that tool. Things like that, right? So the tool that changes that you're picking Raynor for, or that Raynor is changing the game in terms of his interactions, is because he has Q, not because he's a ranged champion that deals physical damage, right? So you can give other heroes his non-Q abilities. For example, I could give Vala his movement speed, attack speed increasing W, and she still doesn't have the same interactions or ability as safety as Raynor Q does, right? They're kind of superfluous. I could give Vala Raynor's E, and Vala having a self-heal doesn't really change the interactions. Now, Vala having an unstoppable on their E, that might. So talents play into this a little bit, that you can change interactions from being a superfluous tool into a fundamental tool, depending on the new functionality that it enables or gives you. Things like that. So heroes are basically mostly defined in draft, especially by their fundamental tools and how those tools interact with each other. If you learn the fundamental tools of the hero, then the superfluous elements are kind of just the tuning stuff that makes a hero balanced versus not balanced. They're kind of the number changes that in any given patch might go up or down, but they don't really change when you're picking that hero or why you're picking that hero in a draft. So here's a quick quiz. What are some fundamental tools of these heroes, right? Try and get all of them if you can. Of Nazeebo, Tehran, Malfurion, Leoric, Sylvanas, okay? Maybe pause the video, take some time, write these out in a little notepad. I only gave 5 here to keep it short. Give some examples, alright? Like a couple seconds. I'm going to change slide. I'm going to spoil the answers. Waiting, paused. Okay, here's the answers. So Nazeebo has Zombie Wall, right? And that's kind of it. He doesn't have a whole lot else. I would also probably add like Ice Block into that and things like that. Depending on if you want to add talents. I was mostly looking at just the baseline hero themselves without any talents, for example. But Tehran, she has her stun, delayed stun in a circle. It's an AoE. Have multiple heroes. She has Shadow Stalk that gives an invisibility. She has Owl if you hit a hero that reveals that hero and the area around him for a little while, right? Malfurion, he has the root on the ground. Moonfire reveal, similarly to Owl. You have Twilight Dream, has the silence. It also gains a blink at some point later in the game. Again, that's a talent. Leoric has Ghost Form. He is unstoppable during that. He's also unstoppable during March. He has Entomb, he create terrain. Some things work differently with player-created terrain versus actual like geometric map terrain. Sylvanas, she can disable stuff with Black Arrow, her trait. She has unstoppable when she's moving in Haunting Wave. Wailing Arrow is an AoE silence. She also has Mind Control, that's also, I believe, a silence. Things like that. Damage types and styles of damage are also a fundamental tool. So you have upfront versus delayed damage. So Jaina is very upfront damage. Nazeebo is very delayed damage, right? He doesn't deal all his damage in one burst. He deals it after a delay, basically. The full damage of his trait has been dealt over whatever it is, 3 seconds. The full damage of Vial Infection, or the full damage of Toads is dealt over 5 seconds, whatever the timer is. There's spike damage versus sustained damage, for example. So, a hero like Jaina or whatever might have very high spike damage, but Blizzard is on like a 16-second cooldown, right? So she does all her damage in a big spike when Blizzard is down, and then for the next 14 seconds, she doesn't deal as high of sustained damage. She can if you invest into like some Frostbolt talents, things like that. Whereas a hero like Orphea, for example, she always has her Q, and it's a very short cooldown whether you hit it or whether you miss it. So her sustained damage is probably a bit higher than Jaina. She does still have burst, but it's on longer cooldown abilities like Chomp, right? You have physical versus magic damage, obviously. You have percent HP damage. That's a very important tool because it kind of works regardless of tools the enemy has in terms of armor and the subtypes of armor, physical armor versus magic armor versus generic armor, right? Range is a fundamental tool, so having 6.5 attack range is pretty good. Area denial. So you have shape, which is stuff like maybe Eternal Feast on Orphea, this big circle. You have APOC, which is dependent on the enemy hero's positionings. Those are smaller circles, but they're centered on each hero's position, for example, rather than a targeted ground placement. You have shape in terms of difference. Deckard, for example, his cube is a square that's perpendicular to his facing direction or his casting direction, technically, when he casts it. You have the triangle of the Scroll of Sealing, I believe it is. So you have the size, for example. So obviously, trying to think of a good example for this, but a route that's kind of like, I can't think of a good example in terms of size. There's not very many abilities that are kind of the same ability, but just different sizes. But anyway, like there's APOC circles. There's maybe a Malfurion root that can grow different in size. I guess that's a good example. It's just Malfurion's root has the talent that grows in size. Okay, that's a good example I thought of. And then duration, obviously, that same talent on Malfurion makes the root last longer, and the root circle itself last longer. So it also denies area for longer, right? You have shields versus actual health versus healing, which is health that you have to have taken damage in order to be able to get value out of. Sustain, things like that, right? Other damage prevention types. So you have dodge, you have just general being immune to damage. I think like Arthas is probably the only one that has that. He's like immune to spell damage on one of his 20s. You can be invulnerable to damage. That's also different than being immune to the damage. Things like that. And some of those also come with CC immunity, things like that. So what does this tell us about Heroes of the Storm? Well, Nazeebo lacks a lot of fundamental tools to change interactions in his favor, right? So he kind of needs something more than the fundamental tools in order to succeed consistently, reliably, and allow him to become quote-unquote meta. So what is that thing that is more that he needs? It's basically stats. It's numbers. It's tuning. It's his health. It's his damage. It's his mana. It's his pure numbers that his character does. A hero that's reliant on tuning, which I would probably consider Nazeebo to be one of those heroes, are not likely to be consistently meta unless they're left either slightly or significantly overpowered for. If they're slightly, it's probably a longer period of time. If they're just massively overpowered, chances are they'll become meta for the duration that they're massively overpowered, but chances are that's not going to last a long period of time. They're only going to be meta for a short period of time, right? On that specific patch or whatever. Most heroes do have a small handful of tools and a couple of superfluous bonuses on top, right? So if the tools are powerful enough to cover a wide variety of interactions, they're good generalist heroes. And they're kind of perma-meta, they're always going to be strong. They'll have a harder time being unviable. Like, it's really hard for Raynor to be unpickably bad, because sometimes you'll just need a hero that's ranged, that does decent damage, that is safe. And Raynor is almost always going to be a pickable hero in that spot. He might deal less damage than you want. He might need, Morales Stim Drone or something to make him deal enough damage that you are really using him to carry the game. But if you just need him to not die, he's one of the best heroes at doing that because he has good tools in order to not die, right? He can give himself armor, he has self healing, which is something no other ranged carry hero really has except for kind of Sol Jin, or like other characters when they invest into like lifesteal type stuff. Things like that. His Q is kind of a very good tool at shutting down tank's ability to engage on him, or other heroes in general, like Kerrigan can't jump on him because he can Q away the Kerrigan jump, things like that. So some heroes have tools that completely shut down the tools of opponents. Silences are a good example of this. Stuns are a really good example of this. They kind of scale infinitely and will always be strong, because as our opponent's tools get stronger, our tool in shutting it down gets equally strong in the negation of that. So a plus 100 ability, if it's getting minused by 100, that value is still 100. Where if it's a plus 200 ability and we minus it by 200, as their ability becomes stronger, ours kept up and it became a minus 200 ability, not a minus 100. So it's still equally as effective at countering it. These are kind of the hard counter picks for certain heroes. There are some soft counter picks as well, and things like that. Those are, again, probably more reliant on tuning or other stuff. Inversely, a hero with limited tools, which are able to be shut down entirely, is a hero who's really susceptible to being counterpicked. It's not a hero that you're going to be able to first pick in draft early on. Probably not. Uh, if other heroes are incapable of being played due to a counter hero and things like that, uh, maybe the other team's incapable of picking it. Maybe they've already used up all their bans. Maybe they picked all 5 of their heroes already. Okay, now it is safe to pick. And now, because they can't shut it down, it might become a win condition all in itself because it's balanced in the sense of how easily counterable it is, but they locked themselves out of being able to counter it, right? So that's pretty much all I got. Hopefully that helped people. Uh, I tried to make this short-ish, and that's why I structured this, but it still ended up being like an hour. So I don't know. Hopefully the emotional kind of subconscious thing was the main kind of thesis statement point that I really wanted to dig into this. At the end, I sort of tried to give more practical examples of ways that you should be thinking about the game. Uh, in terms of having those emotional reactions. Why do I have an emotional reaction as Johanna where I feel like I can't ever hit Raynor and I'm getting frustrated and tilted every time I play against Raynor? Oh, it's because Raynor has this fundamental tool that uh, enables him to shut down what I'm trying to do, right? I'm trying to give answers to kind of some of these emotional questions and provide practical examples of why they might be happening in your games and ways that certain things are causing those reactions in the first place. But the main thing is focus on those reactions when you're playing, and you'll end up finding those answers yourself. Hopefully, finding new answers that I haven't even discovered because you're playing different heroes in different environments where your opponents are getting better. People are basically always improving at this game, so as people have gotten better, we've discovered more of these interactions and discovered more situations and counters to previously thought uh, things that were maybe in the first category of being objectively always good, but then we found out a way that they can um, be effectively not quite countered, but like there's other effective things to be doing, so it's not always the correct decision to do. It's only situationally correct to do it. And there's other situations where this other thing is actually better, things like that. So, all right, that's all I got. I'll cut myself off here before I go too much longer. I pretty much finished the extent of what I tried to get through, though. Hopefully that helps people. Hopefully, if you don't want to be able to uh, be having to pay for a coach or whatever, or be reliant on a coach's time, especially in having your questions answered. Hopefully, this allows people to kind of basically coach themselves and be their own grandmaster level coach in the games of what they're trying to improve at. Again, it applies to a lot of games. It applies kind of universally. I've taken this kind of mentality into a lot of other things, and it's always very effective. Or works outside of games in just life skills in general. If you're trying to learn how to I don't know, do some other sport or activity, play tennis or something like that, or golf. I don't know, whatever it is. Uh, Generally, these things are still applicable, but kind of have to adapt them to your own situation, obviously. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for listening.